Okay. Hello. Today is Wednesday, February 5th, and welcome to episode 410 of the National Securities Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI fellow Jessica Jones. I'm joined today by my co-host, NSI Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller, NSI Advisory Board Member Les Munson, and NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vina. Today, we're talking about the future of USAID, which stands for the U.S. Agency for International Development. On Monday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that he would serve as the acting administrator of the agency, and USAID staff were directed not to report to the agency's Washington, D.C. headquarters. Many were also locked out of their systems. Later that day, some members of Congress tried to enter the building, and there have been protests. Remember, this comes after a January 20th executive order pausing nearly all foreign assistance for 90 days, reports about dismissals of senior civil and foreign service USAID leaders, and kind of just confusion about implementation of current policies, what was on hold, what wasn't. Rubio said the administration's aim was a program by program review of projects to make, quote, America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. But it's pretty clear that the agency is one of DOGE's, Musk's Department of Government Efficiency's prime targets. Reports from yesterday indicate that global officers are being evacuated home. The timeline might still be a little TBD, and also reports of folks massive kind of departures and closed down by the end of the week. Again, might be on hold, might not be. So there's a lot to unpack here. Les, you've been gone for quite a while, so thank you for rejoining us here. So I'm going to go to you first. There's a lot of confusion about what's going on when it comes to aid and what's going on when it comes to the agency. What's your take on what's happening? Are these permanent changes? Are we going to see, a complete change to how aid happens?
Well, a bunch of thoughts, Jones. Great topic. I think, first of all, everyone needs to be reminded that the folks who work at aid and a lot of these implementers are patriotic, loyal Americans who want to serve their country and do good things in the world. And their service really does need to be honored and respected. And they need it. And as this change rolls out, they need to be treated in the best way possible. And I think that is paramount and is kind of critical on a whole bunch of levels. So let me say that first. Secondly, I think it's important that we focus on the outcome of this as maybe the next priority, because the U.S. needs tools to operate in the world. The Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, the President need to have the ability to do things on the ground in a bunch of places. Congress gives the President $30 or $40 billion a year to affect these outcomes. They are good for the American people. We need to have tools that work and function and accomplish our goals. And so it's critical that this stuff be done in a coherent, well thought out way. And it certainly appears right now that it's not really that. There's a lot of chaos and drama and kind of a lot of soap opera aspects that are a little bit silly. And the other thing we need to think about in the even longer term is restoring the political constituency for the program. Because right now, I think there's a lot of Americans who don't understand why foreign aid is actually good for them and good for their country and good for their community. And that means bringing farmers back in. That means bringing manufacturing back in. There's going to have to probably be a bigger Buy America component than there already is in the program and things like that. So there's a lot of work to do here. People who are watching the headlines should realize that the real battle's a little bit below the surface, and that smart members of Congress are engaging with the administration to say, hey, slow this down a little bit. Let's make sure we're doing the right thing. And let's make sure that the thing that comes out on the other end is something that's actually useful for the United States.
Yeah, Morgan, what's your take? Les brings up Congress trying to get the administration to slow down a bit. I mean, what do you see? Do you see pushback from Congress, whether it's today, yesterday, or tomorrow? What do you think the future of aid may look like?
So, Jess, there are a lot of things here, and as Les mentioned, and he alluded to, look, this is politically smart by the Trump administration, right? Foreign aid is not widely popular in the United States, and Americans are either not supportive or indifferent, right? And so there need to be some major changes within how the United States conducts foreign assistance. And frankly, it needs to be done in a way that, gets rid of sort of these antiquated programs that really don't deliver significant U.S. value to U.S. national security. That there are reforms that need to be made, right? However, at the same time, you see the changes that the Trump administration is making right now. They're very sudden. I would argue ham-fisted, and this isn't just affecting U.S. government employees, which understandably, middle of America may not really care too much about. But it's also affecting U.S. farmers, U.S. shippers, and other aspects of the U.S. economy, including small businesses. And so I think we really need to take a very sort of sober-minded approach here about the unintended consequences of these changes. When it comes to Congress, Congress is absolutely concerned about this, but they're not raising Cain like you would think they would if it was, for example, the Department of Education, right? Blue states, or senators and congressmen from blue states, yes, they're raising concerns, but I really think USAID is sort of a trial balloon, and they really need to sort of are trying to measure right now as to what extent they want to push back and whether it's politically smart to do so.
Martha, I want to turn to you. Morgan talks about the maybe unintended consequences of some of these freezes. What are some of the direct consequences, the ones, being felt on the ground across the world, both to those communities and to like our global standing?
Yeah, so we've had, quite a few successful USAID programs that I think have received wide support, both not just with Democrats, but also Republicans, and were championed by Republicans. One was the AIDS Relief for Africa, which actually did garner, that actually garnered a lot of love for the United States and Africa. Also the President's Malaria Initiative, both programs that occurred not just under President Bush, but also were congressional initiatives as well. The PEPFAR was. And that's been, people have been moving that more to a sustainability program as opposed to an emergency program, which is what it was originally created for. That has actually saved 25 million lives. And if you think about the lives affected, the people affected who are loved ones of those 25 million, we're talking, millions of people who were touched by the United States generosity, who remember this generosity and appreciate it. And that goes a long way when we're competing with China and Russia, who, Russia sending the Wagner group into Africa, creating all sorts of destruction and disruption. And then China, putting these countries in debt. That's a pretty big contrast, right? So in terms of, garnering goodwill, and places where terrorists have, historically used as breeding grounds or training grounds, we do need goodwill from people on the ground in these countries so that we can execute on national security priorities. With PMI, the malaria initiative, when a baby gets malaria, they can die within 1 to 4 days without treatment. So, a 90-day pause in this, I'm not I can't prove anything with, I have no numbers to prove anything, but we do know what it takes to save a baby with malaria, or what could happen, right? And so, the challenge is, even when a waiver is granted, given the abruptness of pulling people and the confusion over what can be implemented, ultimately, even a waiver cannot necessarily allow those programs to continue during this 90-day period. So I guess, I'm a little surprised that, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm a little surprised that, with all the thought that could have gone into this, that there could have been a few programs that were clearly humanitarian in nature, that could have been, carved out from the EO, or carved out ahead of, preemptively, as opposed to just this bludgeon approach, which to me comes across as more of sending a message about foreign assistance than it is about careful thought being put into what's actually happening. And it puts into question this idea of putting genuine thought into the effectiveness of USAID. Because if you're really thinking about the effectiveness of USAID, that thought would have been put into this, and it would have been, baked into the actions at the outset, as opposed to allowing all these crazy consequences to unfold willy-nilly. So it makes it look like it was an afterthought, that maybe it just wasn't well executed, and it doesn't make them look as competent as I think they would want to look. And so, I think it doesn't really serve the president well to go about it in this way. And he probably, who knows? I don't know
Wait, DOGE might not be all about government efficiency? That is crazy.
And if this is about saving money, this is less than 1% of the federal budget. So, I understand, I don't disagree that there needs to be reform of our aid programs. I do have problems as well with a lot of the programs that have been cited in the press. I do not disagree that there are some crazy things that have been funded. But again, it goes back to how this unfolded, how this was, put together, how this is being implemented. It could have been done. And I feel like there are some smart people who have been part of the transition who should know. There are so many people involved who should have known, could have known, and could have done this differently, but didn't.
Well, we'll see what the future tools are that Les talks about, and whether there's other trial runs. I'm looking at you, Department of Ed, that might be on the chopping block soon. With that, that's a wrap. Thanks so much to Kelly Crawley, Claude Jennings, and the NSI team for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Friday if we learn if there's any more agencies that have been cut off. February 7th for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube. Check out Les. He's back, his face there. And if you like what you heard or saw, that was a great smile, Les. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.